The docking alarm had been going off for 4 minutes before anyone bothered to check what caused it. Darren Cole was under the belly of a broken freighter, his arms covered in grease up to the elbow, when the alert started ringing. He did not jump. He did not even look up. He finished tightening the coupling he had been working on, counted to 3, then slid out on his back and stared at the ceiling. The alarm meant an unplanned docking. Ships came in without warning at Coda 9 all the time. Most of them were haulers that forgot to pre-register. Some were small traders who thought the rules did not apply to them. Darren had worked on this station for 11 years. He had seen almost every kind of surprise arrival there was. He wiped his hands on a cloth and went to see what the noise was about. By the time he reached the main observation deck, Director Well was already there, pressed against the viewing glass like a child outside a sweet shop. The man was practically vibrating. Varek Royal Vessel, Weil said without turning around. Registry tag is old, but it is real. That is a genuine royal hull marking. Darren looked through the glass. The ship drifting in a docking range was not what he expected. It was large, yes, shaped in that long curved style the Varek favored, with the twin rear fins that looked like folded wings. But it was in terrible shape. One of the fins was bent at an ugly angle. There were long dark scorch marks along the port side, the kind that came from a power surge burning through the hull from the inside. The navigation lights were flickering. "It is a wreck," Darren said. "It is a royal wreck," Weil said. "There is a difference." Darren did not argue. He already knew what was coming. Someone had to go in first and assess the damage before the director started shaking hands with whoever was inside. Station protocol. Safety check before politics. That job usually fell to Darren. He suited up, ran the atmospheric scanner at the docking seal, and went in alone. The inside of the ship was cold and dark. Emergency lighting ran along the floor in a dull orange line. The air was stale but breathable, thin the way recycled air gets when the system has been running on backup power for a long time. Darren moved slowly, checking structural integrity as he went, noting every cracked panel and every dead console. The ship had not been attacked. There were no weapon burns, no impact damage from outside. This was a navigation failure, maybe a cascade power collapse. Something had gone very wrong during a long journey, and no one had come to help. He found a cargo hold about halfway through the ship. The door was sealed, but the lock mechanism had failed, so it only took a moment to pull it open manually. He stepped inside and turned on his hand light. He stood there for a moment. The hold was full. Sealed containers lined both walls, marked with Varek royal symbols. In the center of the floor, carefully strapped down, were several objects wrapped in heavy protective material. One of the wrappings had come loose at a corner, and Darren could see metal underneath, deep gold-black in color, carved with patterns so fine they looked like they had been drawn rather than cut. There were cases of what looked like rare alloys. There were storage boxes sealed with encryption locks that Darren could not have opened if he tried. He had no idea what it all added up to in credits. A lot. More than this station made in years, probably. He took a picture with his scanner, marked the hold as sealed and intact, and kept moving. The rest of the ship was empty. No crew, no passengers. Whoever had been flying this vessel was gone, either evacuated or dead before it drifted here. Darren was near the back of the ship, about to turn around, when his light caught something the scanner had not flagged. A small door, very small, set into the wall of the rear compartment at an angle that would have been easy to miss if you were not shining a light directly at it. No label, no marking. It was the kind of door that was meant to look like part of the wall. Darren opened it. The space inside was not much bigger than a storage alcove. It was lined with insulation material that had been pulled from somewhere else and packed in by hand. The emergency heat unit in the corner was still running, barely. On the floor, wrapped in a torn piece of insulation sheeting, was a child. Darren had seen Varek before. Adults, mostly. Tall, armored-looking, with the layered exoskeleton plates and the wide, flat eyes. This one was small enough to fit in the space with room to spare. The plates were not fully formed yet, soft-looking at the edges. The skin underneath was pale, almost gray, with faint lines of color that pulsed very slowly. Too slowly. There was dried, dark ichor on the floor near her head. Darren did not think about protocol. He did not call Director Weil. He did not take notes in his scanner. He knelt down, checked if she was breathing, found she was, and then picked her up. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her out of the ship, through the docking seal, across the station floor, and directly to the medical bay. The treasure stayed in the hold. The child came with him. The medical bay on Coda 9 was not built for Varric patients. Dr. Rennie said this 3 times in the first 10 minutes, each time a little louder, as if Darren had not heard her the first 2. He had heard her. He just did not leave. He sat in the chair beside the bed and watched while she and her assistant worked, pulling up Varric anatomy files on the medical screen and cross-referencing everything before touching anything. The child had not woken up. Her breathing was shallow, and the faint color lines on her skin had gone almost completely dark. Darren stayed until Rennie told him the patient was stable. Then he stayed a little longer anyway. It was Lena who found him there an hour later. She leaned in the doorway, took one look at the small figure on the bed, and then looked at Darren with an expression he knew well. It was the expression she used when she thought he had done something she could not quite argue with. "Weil is looking for you," she said. "He knows where I am. He is not happy. He will recover." Lena came in and stood beside him, studying the child. The color lines had come back a little. Pale green now, running along the jaw and down the neck. She was still unconscious, but she looked less like she was fading away. "Do you know who she is?" Lena asked. "No, I will find out." That was the thing about Lena. She never asked if she should look into something. She just went and looked. Director Well arrived 20 minutes after that, and he was not quiet about it. He stood in the doorway of the medical bay and told Darren that bringing an unauthorized alien aboard without a medical clearance request, an origin scan, or a diplomatic notice was a serious breach of station procedure. He used words like liability and incident report and potential political fallout. Darren listened to all of it. Then he said, "She was unconscious and bleeding on the floor of a wrecked ship. What would you have done?" Weil opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He was not a cruel man. He was just a careful one, and carefulness had a way of looking like coldness when things moved fast. "She needs to go back to the ship," Weil said finally, "until we establish contact with Varric diplomatic channels and get proper authorization for her presence here. Dr. Rennie says she cannot be moved safely for at least 2 days," Darren said. "So she stays." Weil looked at Rennie. Rennie looked back at him and said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Weil left. The problem, as far as Darren was concerned, was solved for now. Lena came back that evening with something that wiped the calm expression off her face. She pulled a chair close to Darren's and spoke quietly. "I searched every Varric royal registry I could access," she said. "Public records, the diplomatic register, the line of house filings. She is not in any of them." Darren looked at the child. "Not listed as a minor ward, not a staff member's dependent, not anywhere. She does not exist on paper." Lena folded her hands on her knee. "But I found something else. There was a royal voyage that left Varric Prime about 8 months ago. It was supposed to be a diplomatic trip to the outer colonies. It failed. The official record says the voyage was canceled due to navigation difficulties, and everyone returned home safely. Everyone returned home. That is what it says." Darren was quiet for a moment. "She was on that voyage. She had to be. The ship matches the registry window. And Darren, a failed diplomatic voyage leaving Varric Prime 8 months ago. Do the math on the timing." He did. A chill moved through him that had nothing to do with the temperature. A child born during a failed voyage. He had read enough about Varric culture over the years to know what that meant to them. Not nothing. Worse than nothing. An omen. A mark of bad fortune attached to a king who could not afford to be seen as unlucky. "She was being taken away," he said. Quietly, Lena said, "to somewhere she would not be a problem anymore." The word somewhere sat in the air between them. Dr. Rennie appeared at the edge of the room. "She is waking up," she said. They both turned. The child's eyes opened slowly. They were wide and pale gold, and for a moment she simply stared at the ceiling. Then she turned her head and saw Darren. She did not move. She did not make a sound, but the color lines on her skin shifted, going from pale green to something warmer, a soft amber along the temples. Darren did not know what that meant, but she did not look away from him. so he did not look away from her either. A message arrived for Director Wael the next morning. Lena showed Darren the routing stamp on it. Varek Military Frequency. A commander by the name of Brix was already en route to Coda 9. Estimated arrival for days. Whoever had sent that child away had done it quietly on purpose. And now someone was coming to finish the job. For days was not much time. Darren decided not to waste any of it being afraid. The child's name was Sova. She told him on the second day, not with words, but with a pattern of light that ran down her arm in a short burst. Lena had already started building a rough translation tool using the basic Varek bioluminescent signal charts she found in the station's xenobiology database. When Sova lit the pattern, Lena's tool gave them a word. It meant roughly the self that remains. Darren decided it was a name and started using it. Sova watched him say it the first time, and the amber light came back to her temples. He took her to the repair bay on the third day. Dr. Rennie said she was well enough to move around carefully, and lying in the medical bay all day was making her tense. She did not go at first. She pressed herself against the wall, and her color lines went a cold blue-white, which Lena's tool said meant something close to fear or distrust. Darren did not pull her or hurry her. He just sat down on the floor of the medical bay himself and started looking over a small broken diagnostic unit he had brought with him. He took it apart piece by piece, checking each component, setting the broken ones in a separate pile. After about 10 minutes, Sova came and sat near him. Not next to him, near him, close enough to watch. He kept working. She kept watching. By the time he finished, she had moved close enough that her knee was almost touching his. When he stood up, she stood up too. She followed him to the repair bay and sat on an upturned crate in the corner with her hands folded in her lap and her wide gold eyes tracking every move he made. Lena found this deeply touching and said so loudly. Darren told her to be quiet and hand him a calibration tool. On the fourth day, Lena finished a cleaner version of the translation aid. It worked both ways now, picking up Sova's bioluminescent signals and converting them to text, and it could flash simple patterns back to Sova from a small emitter on the device. It was imperfect. A lot of words came through as approximations, but it was enough. The first real thing Sova said through it was a question. Why did you bring me here and not leave me on the ship? Darren was in the middle of replacing a fan assembly. He had not stopped working. Because you were hurt, he said. A pause. Then, the things in the hold are worth more than this whole station. Probably, he said. You did not take any of it. None of it was mine. Another long pause. The amber light moved slowly across her collarbone. I was not yours either. Darren set down the fan component and looked at her directly. No, he said, but you needed help and the boxes did not. Sova was quiet after that for a long time, but she stayed on her crate and she did not go cold blue-white again. It was that same evening that Director Wael called Darren into his office and told him about the deal. It was a good deal, Wael explained for the station. Commander Brix had made contact. The terms were clean. Coda 9 would hand over the royal vessel with all contents completely undisturbed, confirm that no materials had been removed, and transfer the child. In return, the station would receive a favorable trade classification with Varek commercial partners, worth significant revenue over the next several years. Wael was pleased. He used words like opportunity and diplomatic success and positive outcome. Darren waited until he was finished. Then he asked, what happens to Sova after she is transferred? Wael stopped smiling. That is not our concern. I am making it my concern. Darren, Wael's voice dropped to something patient and tired. She is a Varek national. We have no jurisdiction over what happens to her within their political system. She is not in their political system. She does not exist in any registry. Wael had no answer to that. Darren left the office and went directly to the station's administrative terminal. Lena was already there, as if she had known he was coming. Maybe she had. Help me file a galactic welfare record, he said. Lena pulled up the form without asking questions. A galactic welfare record was a real thing, a formal document logged in the Outer Systems Compact Registry, used to establish that a sentient being of uncertain status had been identified, assessed, and documented. It did not give Sova citizenship. It did not give her protection exactly. but it put her name on a list that could not simply be erased. It created a record that said she was real, she had been found, and her condition had been noted by a registered station. It took 2 hours to complete properly. Darren filled in every field. Lena checked every entry. When it was done and filed, Darren sat back in his chair and stared at the confirmation number on the screen. It was not much. He knew that. But it was something the universe now knew about her that her own father had tried to undo. He could not stop what was coming, but he could make sure the galaxy knew she was real. Commander Brix was not what Darren expected. He had imagined someone loud, the way military authority usually announced itself. Brix was the opposite. He was tall even for a Varek, with dark layered plates that were well maintained but not decorated. He walked through the docking seal with 2 soldiers behind him, looked at everything once, and did not look at anything twice. A man who assessed and moved on. Director Weil greeted him at the entrance with both arms open, which was the human gesture Weil used when he wanted to seem warm and important at the same time. Brix acknowledged him with a brief dip of the head and then asked to see the royal vessel immediately. They gave him a full tour of the ship. Darren was not invited, but Lena monitored the docking bay feed and reported back. Brix walked every corridor. He opened the cargo hold and stood inside it for several minutes. He checked every sealed container. When he came out, Lena said his posture had changed slightly, a loosening around the shoulder plates that on a Varek meant something close to relief. He had not expected the hold to be untouched. Darren understood that. A human salvage station finding a Varek royal vessel full of treasures and not taking a single thing from it was, apparently, not what Brix had planned for. Then he asked for the child. Well brought him to the medical bay. Sova was not there. She was in the repair bay, sitting on her crate, watching Darren replace a corroded relay panel. When Weil appeared in the doorway with Brix behind him, Sova's color lines went cold and flat. Not blue-white this time, just gray, like something switching off. Darren set down his tools. Weil said, Darren, Commander Brix is here to complete the transfer. Please bring the patient. Darren looked at Brix. Brix looked at Darren with the flat, professional patience of someone who had done many transactions and found humans mildly tedious but manageable. I would like to ask the commander a few questions first, Darren said. Weill's expression went very still. That is not necessary. I think it is. Darren did not raise his voice. He pulled a small folded paper from his work vest. He had written notes on it the night before, after 2 hours of reading through Galactic Compact Law and Varek Civil Code archives. Under the Varek Covenant of Registered Persons, which Varek Prime ratified in the 42nd cycle, any individual not appearing in a royal or civil registry is classified as an unregistered private citizen. Their transfer across jurisdictions requires consent documentation filed with the Compact Registry. Commander, I filed a welfare record for this individual 4 days ago. She now exists in that registry. Can you show me the consent documentation for this transfer? The repair bay was very quiet. Brix looked at Darren for a long moment. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes was recalculating. She is a ward of the Royal House, Brix said. She is not listed in the Royal House registry, Darren said. I checked 3 times. If she were a ward of the Royal House, she would appear in the line of house filings. She is not. If she is to be treated as royal property rather than a private citizen, that classification would need to be registered and verified against her welfare record, which would require an official royal acknowledgement of her existence. Well, it looked like he wanted to be somewhere else. Anywhere else. Brix was still looking at Darren. You are a mechanic, he said. It was not quite a question. Yes, Darren said. You read Varek Civil Code. I had 4 days. Another silence. Brix turned very slightly toward the doorway, which was not quite looking away from Darren, but was the Varek gesture for needing to think without showing it. The problem was visible even without knowing the culture. If Brix pushed the transfer through by force, it would appear in the Compact Registry as a disputed transfer of a documented welfare case. That created a legal record. A legal record meant questions. Questions meant someone in the Compact Authority asking why a child was not in any Varek registry to begin with, which meant someone asking the king to explain a daughter who officially did not exist. Brix could not take Sova without making the problem much larger for the king than leaving her here. I will need to consult with Varek Prime, Brix said. Of course, Darren said. Brix left with his 2 soldiers. Wiles stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at Darren with an expression that was half furious and half something that might have been respect if it had been given more room to breathe. Then he left too. Sova had not moved from her crate. Her color lines were shifting now, moving from gray back toward green, slow and careful, like a light being turned up gradually. She watched Darren pick up his tools and go back to the relay panel. After a minute, her voice came through the translation device on the workbench beside him. You did not have to do that. Darren adjusted the relay fitting. You needed someone to. The green light settled on her skin and stayed. For the first time in her life, someone had argued for her existence. And won, at least for today. The communication request came in at 0340 station time, when most of Coda 9 was asleep. It was flagged urgent and routed directly to the director's office, which triggered the secondary alert that woke Wael, which caused Wael to call Darren at an hour no reasonable person expected a call. Darren was already awake. He had been lying on the cot in the repair bay, which he had started sleeping on because Sova sometimes had bad nights, and he found it easier to be nearby than to be summoned. Wael's voice through the comm was tight and strange. It is King Orith, he said. He is asking to speak with the person who filed the welfare record. Darren sat up. He took a moment. Then he said, Tell him I will be there in 5 minutes. Darren, I have to strongly advise against 5 minutes, Darren said, and cut the comm. He arrived at the communication terminal to find Wael, Lena, Commander Brix, and 2 station administrators all standing in a cluster, all talking at once. Darren walked through the middle of them and sat down at the terminal. The others went quiet. The screen was active. The figure on it was large even by Varek standards, with plates that had the blue-black patina that came with age and high station. His eyes were very still. King Orith did not look like someone who was used to waiting. You are the mechanic, Orith said. Yes, Darren said. You filed the welfare record. Yes. Orith studied him the way someone studies a lock they have not seen the design of before. I am prepared to offer you compensation, he said. Personal compensation. A sum that would be significant even by the standards of your species' wealthiest individuals. File a withdrawal of the welfare record. Release the child to Commander Brix's custody, and speak of none of this to anyone. The matter ends there. Wael made a small sound behind Darren, the kind of sound a man makes when he is doing difficult arithmetic in his head. Darren leaned forward slightly in his chair. I appreciate the offer, he said, but I'm going to decline. The room behind him was so quiet he could hear the ventilation system. Ortha's expression did not shift, but his plates moved, a very small adjustment at the jaw and neck, which Darren had learned was a Varek sign of genuine surprise being held in check. You are declining. Yes. I do not think Sova has done anything wrong. She is a child who was injured on a ship that failed mid-voyage. She is recovering well. She has not caused any problems here. I cannot think of a good reason to rush her anywhere until she is well and has a clear place to go where someone will actually look after her. She is a complication in a political situation that does not concern you. She is a child sitting in my repair bay learning the names of my tools, Darren said. That concerns me. A long silence. King Orith had the look of a man who had not been told no in a very long time and was now doing the unusual work of sitting with it. His stillness was not calm. It was the stillness of enormous restraint. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, What does she do there? In your repair bay. Darren blinked. It was not the question he expected. She sits and watches, he said. She started pointing out components that looked wrong before I got to them. She has a good eye. Another silence. Different this time. Harder to read. She is eating? Orth asked. Yes. Dr. Rennie figured out a diet that works for her. She is not afraid. Darren thought about the first days, the cold blue-white light, the way she pressed against walls. She was, he said honestly, she is not much anymore. The king was quiet for what felt like a long time. Darren did not fill the silence. He had learned, in 11 years of working on machines, that sometimes you had to let something run and find its own level. Finally, Orith said, "I will be in contact with Commander Brix." And the channel closed. No threats, no second offer, nothing that could be quoted or filed. Darren turned around. Weil looked drained. Lena looked like she was trying not to smile, and mostly failing. Brix was unreadable, which was its own kind of readable. The next day, a new filing appeared in the Varek Civil Registry. Lena found it and came to the repair bay at a speed that was almost running. Sova had been given a formal registration, not as heir, not as a named member of the royal line, but as a documented ward of the house, with a legal identity, with rights under Varek Compact law. She existed, officially, on paper, in a system that had tried very hard to make her disappear. Later that afternoon, Brix appeared alone in the doorway of the repair bay. He stood there until Darren noticed him. "I have been in service for 30 years, Brix said. I have never seen the king reverse a quiet disposal order. Not once." He paused. "What did you say to him that I could not?" Darren thought about it. He picked up a relay component and turned it over in his hands. "I just told him the truth," he said. The king had moved mountains for titles and wars. One mechanic had moved him by describing a child watching broken things get fixed. 3 weeks passed the way good weeks do on a working station. Loudly, with problems, and faster than expected. Sova got better in the quiet way that children get better when they stop being afraid. It was not sudden. It happened in small stages, the way a bent metal piece slowly returns to shape when the heat is applied carefully and the pressure is patient. She stopped sitting on the far crate and started sitting on a closer one. She stopped waiting for Darren to hand her things and started picking them up herself, turning them in her fingers, testing their weight. She developed a habit of tapping a specific rhythm on the workbench when she found something she thought was interesting, which Lena's translation tool eventually identified as an approximation of the Varek word for worth examining. Darren started paying attention to that tap. She was right more often than not. Lena finished a second version of the translation tool, cleaner and faster, and for the first time, they could have something close to a real conversation with Sova. Not perfectly smooth. There were still gaps, still moments where a concept in one language had no equivalent in the other. But enough. One afternoon, Sova asked Darren why he fixed broken things for a living. He had to think about it. He said he supposed it was because he did not like the idea of something useful being thrown away just because it stopped working right. Most things could be repaired if you took the time. Sova was quiet for a moment. Then her translation came through. Even things that were made wrong from the start. "Those take longer," Darren said. "But mostly yes." Lena, who was at the other workbench pretending not to listen, found something very interesting to look at on her screen. The formal offer from Varek Prime came through on a regular morning. The way most important things arrived at Coda 9, sandwiched between shipping invoices and maintenance requests. Weil brought it to Darren personally, which was unusual. He held the document printout with both hands and set it on the workbench with the careful manner of a man placing something fragile. The arrangement was clean and clearly written. Sova would remain at Coda 9 under a mutual custody framework. A Varek guardian of record would be named on paper, a legal formality that satisfied Varek House requirements. The station would receive an ongoing trade credit, modest but real, as a courtesy arrangement. Sova's welfare record would be linked to the new registration and kept active. The last line named Darren Cole, station mechanic, as primary caretaker of the ward, responsible for her daily well-being. Nobody had asked him first. Weil had the grace to look slightly embarrassed about this. "It was written that way when it arrived," he said. "I believe the king's people made assumptions based on the welfare record you filed." Darren read the document again from the top. He read it slowly. Lena appeared at his elbow from nowhere, the way she always did when something was happening. She read it over his shoulder, and then she said nothing, which was louder than anything she could have said out loud. Darren looked across the repair bay. Sova was on her close crate, the one she had migrated to over the past 2 weeks. She was holding a cracked circuit board up to the light, tilting it at different angles, her color lines a steady warm gold. She had not noticed the document. She was just doing what she did now, which was sit in the bay and look at things carefully and tap the workbench when she found something worth examining. Darren picked up a pen. He signed the document. Wall took it back with the careful hands of a man who knew when not to say anything and left. Lena looked at Darren for a long moment. Then she picked up her tools and went back to work, which was the best thing she could have done. Life on Coda 9 did not pause for paperwork. A hauler came in with a seized drive coupling that afternoon, and Darren had it apart on the floor by evening. Sova sat nearby. She had started anticipating which tools he would need in a sequence, and twice that week she had handed him the right thing before he reached for it. He had not said anything about this, but he had noticed, and she had noticed him noticing, and the warm gold light stayed. Other ships passed through. Crews of different species came and went. Sometimes they saw Sova in the bay and asked questions, cautious or curious, depending on the species. A Varric cargo crew came through once, and one of them stopped and stared at her for a long moment, clearly trying to place her class markings, clearly confused. Darren answered before anyone else could. He did not explain the welfare record or the king's filing or Commander Bricks or any of the rest of it. He just said, "She is with me." The cargo crew moved on. The royal vessel sat in Docking Bay 3, sealed and untouched. The treasures were still in the hold. No one had opened it since the day Bricks confirmed the inventory. It would stay there until Varric Prime sent someone to collect it, which would happen eventually on their schedule when it suited them. Darren had not thought about it once. He had gone into that ship looking for damage and found a wrecked navigation system, a failed power cell, and one small girl on the floor of a hidden alcove. The treasures were still in the hold. No one had touched them. No one needed to. The mechanic had already found the only thing worth keeping.